I used to be a police officer, dedicated to the work, committed to serving the community, but there are moments that change everything. One case forever altered my perspective and made me question everything I believed in. It all began when I received a call about a woman who had an armed intruder in her home. Immediately, my team and I rushed to the scene. As we approached the house, we did a quick reconnaissance around the perimeter. The front door was unlocked, which wasn't a good sign. We entered cautiously, conducting a thorough search through the house. My mind raced, praying that we would find her alive, that it wasn't too late. But as we climbed the stairs, that hope was shattered. In the bedroom we found her body, cold and lifeless. She had been gone for what seemed like mere minutes. The scene was devastating. We quickly began securing the area and called for the forensics team, trying to process the unimaginable. Then everything took a dark turn. The evidence we collected led us to a chilling discovery. My brother's fingerprints were found on the victim's body. That revelation shattered me. I couldn't comprehend how my own flesh and blood could be involved in something so horrific. In that moment, everything I had believed about my family and my role as an officer was thrown into chaos. The more we investigated, the worse it got. My brother's connection to the victim came to light. She had been in a relationship with him years ago. That was likely the motive behind the crime, though it was hard to believe. But knowing my brother, it started to make sense. Adam had always been charismatic, the golden child of the family. He had a way of charming everyone around him, from our parents to strangers. As kids, he was the leader of our group, the one who always got his way. He knew how to manipulate others to do his bidding, even if it meant breaking the rules. I remember one particular incident when we were young. Adam wanted a toy, a remote-controlled car that one of the other kids had at school. Instead of taking it himself, he convinced a few younger kids to steal it for him during recess. He watched from the sidelines, pretending not to know what was happening. When the toy was stolen, he played the part of the innocent bystander, offering to help look for it. The pattern continued at home. One time, a $50 bill went missing from Dad's wallet, and again, Adam was the first to offer to help find it. He turned the house upside down, but the money was never found. Our parents, instead of suspecting him, praised him for his efforts. They were grateful for his help, slipping him another $20 as a reward. Adam knew exactly how to work the system. He had the perfect balance of charm and manipulation, and he used it to his advantage at every turn. But as he grew older, his recklessness caught up with him. By his teenage years, he was getting into more serious trouble. He started hanging out with a rough crowd, skipping school and smoking behind the gym. His actions became more impulsive, more reckless. I remember when he was 18, Adam and his friends broke into the school after hours, just for the thrill of it. They smashed windows, ransacked classrooms, and tagged the walls with graffiti. The police were called, and the evidence quickly pointed to Adam and his friends. When our parents found out, they were shocked, not angry, just disappointed. They couldn't fathom that their perfect son could do something like this. They talked to him, but instead of punishment, they asked him to do better. And, of course, Adam promised he would. But the next day he was back out with the same crowd, doing the same reckless things. Fast forward to the present, and the investigation into the woman's death was uncovering more damning evidence. Adam's fingerprints were found on the victim's clothing, and soon, it was clear that he was the prime suspect. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was undeniable. As the evidence continued to pile up, the weight of the situation began to crush me. Adam's fingerprints on the victim's body, his connection to her, and the mounting evidence against him. Everything pointed to him as the killer. Yet deep down I couldn't accept it. This was my brother we were talking about. I had known him my entire life, and the thought of him being capable of murder was unbearable. I tried to reach him, calling his phone repeatedly, but he never answered. Panic set in as I realized that I couldn't find him anywhere. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I raced to his apartment, hoping it was all a misunderstanding, hoping that there was some logical explanation. But when I got there, it was clear he had left in a hurry. Clothes were strewn about the floor, drawers were left wide open, and his safe was emptied. It looked like he had packed up and fled. I knew what I had to do next. The department launched a full-scale manhunt for Adam. His face was plastered on every news station, and every police officer in the city was on high alert. But for me, the lines between being a cop and being a brother were becoming increasingly blurred. I wasn't just hunting down a suspect. I was searching for my own flesh and blood. Days passed, and there was still no sign of Adam. I was barely sleeping, barely eating. I was consumed with guilt, wondering if there was something more I could have done to stop this from happening. I felt like I was losing myself in the process, caught between my duty and my love for my brother. Then, just when I thought I might break, we got a break in the case. A motel manager on the outskirts of town reported a man who resembled Adam had checked in under a fake name. My heart raced as I drove to the motel, praying that it wasn't him. When I arrived, I knew that this was it, the moment of truth. We surrounded the building and began the search. I could feel the tension in the air as we moved closer to the room where Adam was supposedly hiding. I called out to him, telling him to come out with his hands up. There was a long pause, and then the door creaked open. There he was, disheveled, pale, and exhausted. But what hit me the hardest was the look in his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, but more than that, he looked defeated. His gaze locked onto mine, and he pleaded with me. "I didn't do it," he said, his voice cracking. "You have to believe me. I didn't do it." I wanted to believe him. With every ounce of my being, I wanted to believe him. But the evidence was so overwhelming. I could feel my heart breaking as I stepped forward and slapped the cuffs on his wrists. I was the one who had to arrest him, my own brother. The interrogation that followed was grueling. I had to watch from behind the glass, unable to intervene. Adam cried, begged, and swore his innocence, but nothing changed the facts. His fingerprints were all over the victim's body, and his past with her only added to the motive. He tried to convince me that he had been set up, that someone else was responsible for what happened. But deep down, I knew that the evidence was too strong to ignore. The days following Adam's arrest felt like a blur. The department was relentless, pressing him for information. But all Adam did was cry, plead his innocence, and try to convince everyone that he had been framed. It was gut-wrenching to watch. The man I had known my entire life was now a suspect in a brutal murder, and despite everything in me wanting to believe him, the evidence was stacking up too high to ignore. He swore to me with all his heart that he had not killed that woman. He told me that he loved her, that they had a past, but he would never harm her. I wanted to believe him. The thought of my own brother being capable of such an act tore me apart, but I had to remain impartial. The facts were staring me in the face. His fingerprints on the victim's clothing, the timeline matching perfectly. His history with her. No one else had the motive, and no other suspects emerged. The days turned into weeks, and the case went to trial. Watching the prosecution build their case against Adam was like living in a nightmare. Each piece of evidence they presented seemed to confirm what I had feared. They painted Adam as a cold, calculating killer, someone who had snapped and taken out his anger on his ex-girlfriend. The story they told made sense, and the jury seemed to buy it. My own heart was at war with my duties. As a cop, I had to be objective. I couldn't allow my personal feelings to cloud my judgment, but it was impossible to ignore the part of me that still hoped Adam was innocent. I had to fight against my own bias, my own emotions, as the prosecution tore him apart in front of the jury. Then came the defense. They tried their best to poke holes in the prosecution's case, but it was clear that the evidence weighed heavily in the prosecution's favor. They brought up Adam's past, his charm, and his ability to manipulate those around him, but it wasn't enough to make a dent in the prosecution's case. I sat through every grueling day of the trial, feeling like I was suffocating. There was no escape from this nightmare. It was late one night, long after most of the officers had gone home, that I found something. The station was almost empty, the hum of the fluorescent lights the only sound in the quiet building. I had been going over the crime scene photos again, trying to find something, anything that could suggest Adam's innocence. I wasn't sure why I kept doing it. The evidence was overwhelming, yet there was a small part of me that refused to let go of the possibility that he might be innocent. As I went through the photos, my eyes landed on something unusual. There was a faint smudge on the back door frame in one of the images. It was barely noticeable, almost imperceptible, but I knew something wasn't right. I zoomed in on the image and could make out the outline of a fingerprint, smeared like someone had grabbed the door in a hurry. I pulled up the forensic report and compared it to Adam's prints. The match was perfect. This wasn't just any fingerprint. This was Adam's fingerprint. But there was more. As I examined the photo further, I noticed a small object on the ground beneath the print. It was sparkling in the light, almost like it was trying to call attention to itself. I zoomed in again and realized what it was. It was the woman's necklace. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My brother had been there. He had been trying to leave unnoticed, probably after a struggle. The necklace was torn from her neck in the chaos, and he had fled, leaving behind this trace evidence. I couldn't believe it. After everything I had hoped for, everything I had wanted to believe, the truth was staring me right in the face. Adam had killed her. The evidence was undeniable. The moment I made the connection, I felt the world shift beneath my feet. It wasn't a sense of relief, but rather a crushing weight of betrayal and heartbreak. I had spent weeks, months even, convincing myself that Adam might be innocent, but now the truth was clear. He had murdered her. There was no other explanation. The smudged fingerprint, the necklace, everything pointed to him. I wanted to confront him immediately, to ask him why, to demand answers. But I knew I had to remain professional. The case was bigger than our family. It was a matter of justice. But even as I investigated, part of me still wanted to find a way to save him. I couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be some mistake, some way out. But there wasn't. The trial continued, and the evidence weighed heavily on Adam. His defense tried to paint him as a victim, as someone who had been set up, but it was clear that the prosecution's case was airtight. The more I watched, the more I realized that I wasn't just losing my brother. I was losing myself. My world was collapsing around me, and I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Was I a cop, or was I just a broken brother who had failed to protect his own flesh and blood? The day of the verdict came, and it was the hardest day of my life. I sat there in the courtroom, my stomach twisting, waiting for the judge to speak. When the words came, they hit me like a sledgehammer. "Guilty," he said. "Guilty of first-degree murder, breaking and entering, and assault with a deadly weapon." I looked over at Adam, and he was staring at the ground, his face pale and emotionless. The boy who had always been able to charm his way out of everything was now going to spend the rest of his life in prison. Life without parole. The moment Adam was sentenced, something inside me broke. I felt like a part of me had died with him. He was still my brother, the person I had grown up with, the one I had looked up to, and yet here he was, a convicted murderer, locked away for the rest of his life. I couldn't continue being a cop after that. Every time I put on the uniform, all I could think about was the trial, the evidence, the verdict. I couldn't face it. I couldn't face the world knowing that I had failed to protect my own brother. The guilt ate at me. I handed in my resignation and walked away from everything I had worked for. The badge, the uniform, the job. I couldn't do it anymore. The months following Adam's conviction were some of the darkest of my life. I couldn't escape the haunting thoughts of what had happened, of what I had lost. I tried to move on, to live a normal life, but it was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adam's face, staring at the ground, accepting his fate. I found work as a private investigator, but I stayed far away from any cases that reminded me of my brothers. I couldn't handle it. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could start fresh, rebuild my life. But nothing would ever be the same. Then, one day, out of the blue, I received a letter from Adam. It was short, just a few lines, but it shook me to my core. It read, I lied. I wasn't innocent, but I wasn't alone either. There's more to this than you know. I'm sorry. When I read those words, my stomach dropped. I wasn't innocent, but I wasn't alone either. What did he mean? Was he admitting to the crime, or was there something more behind it? I couldn't let it go. Not after everything. I kept the letter hidden, folding it up and tucking it away in a place where no one would find it. I knew what I had to do. I had to reopen the case. Not officially, not as a cop, but as a brother. I needed to know the truth. I couldn't live with this uncertainty hanging over me. I started digging again, retracing my steps, re-interviewing witnesses. The case had gone cold, but I wouldn't stop. I had to uncover what my brother had meant by those words. What was he hiding? And who else was involved? The truth was out there, and I was determined to find it, no matter what it cost me.